You are listening to the Silver Screen Happy Hour. I'm Chris Wiegand, along with my brother Jerome.
Present and accounted for.
We do have some drinks to pair with these movies, and I'm going to have to intermix it with some water, because it's just whiskey today, folks.
Oh, hell yeah.
Well, Jerome, you might have some lightsaber backup. You usually do.
I always do. You know I do. Yeah, no, I'm excited about today. I haven't been... I'm excited for every episode, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Even if... I'm gonna set it up with... Even when we decide on movies that I'm not 100% in love with, like we'll have movies that are topical, and I'm like, oh, those are good movies. We could do that. By the time I'm done with the notes, I'm fired up because I learn more, right, about the movies. And even if it's movies that I've seen, like Silence of the Lambs, I've loved for years and I've seen a million times. But when I really broke it down by notes, I was like, God, I love it even more now.
Yeah.
So, but this one I was particularly excited for, and after the notes, I'm lit up like a fucking Christmas tree.
All right, so what are the movies we're talking about today?
We are doing the 1992 Unforgiven, starring Clint Eastwood, and I believe it's 2014.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? 2014 John Wick, the first one, starring Keanu Reeves. The reason we picked these movies is they both kind of serve this I was once a killer theme, you know, where they're kind of in retirement for whatever reason, and they come out of retirement for something pulls them back into the life. So I was intrigued by doing these two movies. I know that it's a common theme, actually, when you think of a lot of movies that have ex-assassins. Taken is another example of a CIA operative or whatever who's now retired and in the normal life, and something happens where he has to get back into it and kick everybody's ass that gets in front of him. So we love these movies because we see themselves as these guys, like, oh, with the things you'll do to right the wrongs of the world. So we were very much excited about the concept of once a killer.
Yeah. My son Josh was over and he was watching John Wick with me this time. And he's like, we were talking about it, and he's like, man, I know he was an assassin and stuff, but someone killed my dog that my dead wife just gave me. I'd become a killer too.
Well, we got a lot to talk about with John Wick, and we got a lot to talk about with Unforgiven, but let's start off with, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm calling it generic whiskey because the brand of whiskey has nothing to do with the movie. So I'm going with an Irish whiskey. Hold on, let me get the audio of this pour.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. There we go. A little Jameson, simply because it's a lazy day and I didn't get the bottle that I wanted. I think you got the bottle that I would have wanted.
Okay, so first I got a comment on yours. So my brother has a big jug of Jameson.
Oh, it's like a Sam's Club jug.
Right. So let me guess. Well, of course, cost of living in Michigan's a little bit more reasonable than California. In California, that's a $50 bottle.
Yeah, it's about the same here.
Is that about the same? Okay, so it's $50 at Costco. So here's the story.
Yeah.
I recently had my 49th birthday, the tender age of 49. And my wife was like, you know what? Get whatever you want. I don't really know what to get you. So I'll give you $100 budget to get a bottle of your choosing.
Nice. Happy birthday.
So I go to Costco where the prices are the best. And I see that Jameson's jug for $50, and I'm like, I could just get 2 bottles of Jameson's and meet the budget. But then I was like, nah, fuck that. I'm gonna get something really nice. I ended up getting, this isn't it, this is a different story. I ended up getting myself $85 bottle of Macallan. So it was very nice scotch. Yeah, and I brought it home to find that my wife, while I was at Costco getting this bottle, threw a little surprise party for me. So I had all my neighbors over.
Nice.
And one of them, my buddy Eric, who lives down the street, him and his lady Siri, who are engaged, they actually got me this Blanton's original single barrel bourbon whiskey, and it's the exact bottle from John Wick. They had no idea. It just happens to be. This is just serendipitous.
Yeah,
it's the
great.
Bottle. It's the bottle that, for those of you who've seen the movie, Keanu Reeves calls up. He needs to be stitched up by the doctor, and they give him bourbon as a pain reliever, and this is the bottle they send up. So it's a very nice Blanton's whiskey from the movie, and I am going to open up mine now. So I normally don't use rocks. You know me, I have a thing against ice. But John Wick had ice in his glass when he drank it.
Yep.
So if Keanu can't go wrong, then I can't go wrong. Here we go. You ready?
Nice.
I want to go more than that, but I probably shouldn't.
Have you tried this stuff yet?
I have never had it before.
Okay.
So, introductory sip. Here we go. Oh, boy. That'll put hair on your balls.
It's going to be a good show, people.
Very nice. It's going to be a really good show, people. All right. What do you want to start with? I kind of wanted to go with Unforgiven, like chronologically.
Yeah, let's go chronological.
All right, so I'll give you the specs here. Unforgiven, 1992, directed by Clint Eastwood, written by David Webb Peoples. Running time is 2 hours, 10 minutes, and a budget of $14.4 million. It was released on my 17th birthday, August 7th, 1992. It made over $101 million domestic, which is good for 11th place that year. Just behind the number 10 film, A League of Their Own, at $107 million. Guess what the number one movie of 92 was?
92. Oh, man. I don't know. What was it?
And it's funny that today, like, the number one movies are always movies that top $1 billion. The top grossing movie of 1992 was at $217 million domestically.
Wow.
It was Aladdin.
Aladdin. No kidding. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Unforgiven was nominated for 9 Academy Awards and won 4 of them, including Best Picture, Clint for Best Director, his first Oscar. He now has 4, by the way, but that was his first. It also won for Joel Cox's film editing and Best Supporting Actor, Gene Hackman. His second Oscar, his first was for Best Actor for The French Connection back in 71. Side note, Clint was also nominated for Best Actor for this movie, but he lost to Al Pacino in Son of a Woman, which was Al's first and only Oscar, which many felt was a makeup award for all the years that he got dicked over in the 70s.
For sure.
Okay, it stars Clint Eastwood as William Money, Gene Hackman as Little Bill Daggett, Morgan Freeman as Ned Logan, Richard Harris as English Bob, as well as co-stars Frances Fisher, who was dating Clint at the time. Another little funny story there. I think I have it in the trivia, so we'll get to it later. She plays Strawberry Alice. James Woolvett as the Schofield Kid. That's literally his character's name. They don't ever say what his name is.
Right.
It's just the Schofield Kid. Saul Rubinek as W.W. Beauchamp, and Anna Thompson as Delilah Fitzgerald, the physically assaulted prostitute.
Who was also in a movie we just did.
Wait. You fucking jumped the gun here. I was literally about to say a few connections to the previous podcast we just did.
Yeah.
Saul Rubinek, who plays W.W. Beauchamp, and Anna Thompson, who plays Delilah, were both in True Romance, which is the film we covered before this. And, of course, Gene Hackman was in Bonnie and Clyde. So actually 3 of them, which we also covered on the previous episode.
Yep.
Another almost kind of bizarre, weird connection, if you could call it that. The character of the Schofield Kid in Unforgiven is played by James Woolvett. But when I first saw the movie, I remember thinking that it was Christian Slater at first sight.
Oh, because of the eyes?
Because he looks a lot like him. Yeah. Until I realized it wasn't him. But Christian Slater was also in True Romance. So if it was Christian Slater, we'd have a trifecta.
Right.
Okay, when did you first see this movie?
Oh, man. I probably saw it at the theater. I was thinking about this, and I could not remember. I remember it was really hyped up in 92. And, you know, I mean, I don't know. I know I saw it in 92. I think I saw it at the theater, and I've seen it a bunch of times. So we had it on DVD, I think. And, man, I couldn't find the DVD when I was preparing for this, and thankfully it was on sale it was like half off on Amazon Prime, so I just bought it for like $7 or something. So yeah, I've seen it several times. I know I saw it in 92. Something funny about the name, I guess this is trivia, but I'm going to throw it in here now. So this came out, what month did it come out? Do you remember?
August 7th. It came out on my birthday.
On your birthday. So August 7th, 92. A few months earlier in 91, a song that was playing on the radio in 92 came out called The Unforgiven by Metallica. And it was just coincidental timing, I think. And it just so happened that you had this number one song on the radio and a number one movie at the box office at the same time. So kind of cool.
I was actually going to mention that as well because
Oh, really?
Metallica's Black Album came out 1 year before. I want to say it was August of 91.
Yep.
So almost exactly a year before. But by the time the Unforgiven single was hitting the radio,
Right. It was 92.
The hype for this movie was coming out. And I remember thinking they made a movie out of this song already.
I know.
and then I realized, oh, no, it's a Western. It has nothing to do with the song. Right. But I still thought, like, before I'd even seen the movie or anything and knew really what it was about, I didn't really know what it was about. I was like, I bet you that song's in the movie. I bet you it's in the closing credits or something. So I couldn't have been more wrong, and I'm glad that I was way off because that wouldn't have fit at all.
Right.
But yeah, kind of funny that, like you said, the number one movie and a number one song. I saw it, again, also in the theater. And, man, I was floored then. But I wasn't as big into Westerns at the time. Mm-hmm. That might have been, actually. Dad made me watch A Fistful of Dollars when I was like 10 years old.
Same.
and I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But, I was into Star Wars and shit. So I'm like, it's not really my cup of tea. I didn't get into Westerns till I got older. And I want to say this might have been the movie that did it. Because after this movie, I went back and watched fucking Outlaw Josie Wales and High Plains Drifter. I really got into Clint's older movies.
Well, and I remember Dad liked those spaghetti westerns. And, like when one was on cable, if he was channel serving, he was going to stop.
Yeah.
And so I saw parts of a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But just because Dad stopped, on a Sunday scroll.
It's like what you and I would do now if we're flipping through and like Roadhouse is on, like I know that Vivi's going to grow up someday and tell people like, yeah, if, Top Gun happened to be on TBS, that's what we were watching. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. Of course, everything's streaming now.
But I think this was probably the first like modern day, like produced Western that I saw. Because, Westerns weren't I don't think they were a very big genre in Hollywood, right? That's why they could film them cheap in Italy. That's why they called them spaghetti Westerns, right?
Yeah. This one actually was shot in Canada, but yeah, all of Clint's older ones.
North America, yeah.
Yeah, all of Clint's older ones, were shot in Italy because it was cheaper.
Yeah.
And so, he made a lot of them. And I went back and watched, like, all of them, man. I wanted to really... This movie got me so into it that I started to watch all of them. You know what? I actually take that back. Young Guns was probably the first Western I actually watched.
When did that come out?
That was, like, late 80s. I want to say 88, 87, something like that.
Huh.
You have to look that up. Do you have it in front of you?
I will in a moment.
Okay, well, while you're looking that up, but Unforgiven really got me into Clint's Westerns.
You're right,
88. So, but like I said, so when I got into Clint, man, I went back and watched all those old ones, and I really fell in love with, I think The Good and the Bad, the Ugly might be one of the greatest Westerns of all time. Unforgiven's up there, though, man. Yeah. Unforgiven is up there.
Yeah, another one that came to mind was Tombstone, which actually came out the following year, 93.
Yeah, and you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if the push by the studios to get something like that out was because of Unforgiven and its success.
Yeah, right.
Because look what happened after Gladiator came out. All of a sudden you had sword and sandal shit all over the place, and they were making HBO series, about it, and all of a sudden everybody was into Spartacus again. Yeah. So I wouldn't doubt that Tombstone, although it was probably in production anyway. They rushed that shit. Once Best Picture was announced, they're like, we got to get Tombstone in theaters, like, ASAP.
And wasn't there was like two studios did Westerns in 93, Tombstone and what else? What was the other one?
Well, there was Wyatt Earp. I thought that was a year later, though. I thought that was in 94.
I thought they came out around the same time.
I think, Kevin Costner did his version of Wyatt Earp. I thought they were a year apart, but I could be wrong on that. I thought Wyatt Earp came out in 94. But you'll have to check.
Oh, you're right. It was, for some reason, I thought they were the same time.
But think about that. Like, to now talk about getting that rushed, after Unforgiven, everybody was like, all of a sudden we have to have all these Westerns now.
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right. Log me.
Retired Old West gunslinger William Money reluctantly takes on one last job with the help of his old partner, Ned Logan, and a young man, the Schofield Kid. That's it.
All right. So I like it. I like it.
Yeah, it's nice and tidy.
So a little side note on this former killer stuff that we're going to talk about today, along with John Wick. while both characters try to tell themselves and the audience throughout the whole film pretty much that they're not back, quote unquote,
Right.
into their old world of killing. They both seemingly got out because of a woman. I don't know if you noticed that. They're both in both films. A good woman came along and straightened these guys out and gave them good lives. And of course,
what Clint Eastwood say? Showed me the error of my ways.
Yeah.
Like
he uses wickedness a lot. My days of wickedness. And of course, both wives pass on, so they're now left with themselves pretty much. And I thought it was interesting that we're going to get to John Wick, but really only William Money kind of goes back to his normal life. Without ruining the ending of John Wick, you do know it has 3 sequels. So
and before the end of John Wick, the one we're talking about, he announces that, yes, I'm back.
So even if you hadn't seen the movie and you didn't want me to ruin it, there's 4 John Wick movies.
Yeah, right.
So, they don't all take place in the same day. But all right. Okay, we have the beats. Opening image, the sun is setting in the distance, a silhouette of William Money burying his wife with an on-screen crawl setting up who Will is and that his wife has recently died. Inciting incident, the 4-point push starts pretty quickly in this movie, 2 minutes in, as a matter of fact, on a rainy night in a fictitious small town of Big Whiskey, Wyoming. A couple of cowboys rough up and cut up a prostitute after she laughed at the size of his penis. This not only introduces the prostitute girls, or I should just say prostitutes, Strawberry Alice, Delilah, Kate, Faith, Silky, and Little Sue, but also saloon owner Skinny, the cowboys Quick Mike and Davy, and ultimately the town sheriff, Little Bill Daggett. So there's a lot of setup in this first inciting incident scene, and it's just a few minutes in. Not just the actions, but the characters themselves. And so we're gonna do a little exercise here. One for you beginning writers. This is a good exercise for you. I call it late to the movies. Okay, for you beginning writers, if someone is gonna go see your movie and they're running late and they had to stop for popcorn and a Coke and they didn't get into their seat until 10 minutes into the movie, ask yourself, did they miss any setup? If the answer is no, they didn't miss anything, then, for a beginning writer, you're going to want to go back to that early first 10 pages of your first act and tighten the shit out of it. Put some setup in there. Yeah. Don't make it so boring. Yeah. If the answer is yes, they would miss a lot, then you're on the right track.
And if not, then you might have lost a few people. They might have walked out.
Yeah, this is one of those movies. If you walk in 10 minutes late to Unforgiven,
you're like, what the
man,
hell?
you fucking missed a lot because they cram a lot into the first 10 minutes. Okay, so and then the next morning is a little bit of setup here. The girls get together and they come up with a $1,000 bounty for revenge on the cowboys because Little Bill, the sheriff, comes and doesn't really punish them at all. He fines them a couple of horses each. Okay, theme stated. Real intro to William Money now, a father and hog farmer. Also intro to Pete Sothow's nephew, the Schofield kid. 8 minutes in, the kid says to Will, "You don't look like no rootin', tootin' son of a bitch and cold-blooded assassin." And this is going to be the running theme throughout the entire film. Not just with Will adjusting to his post-assassin life, but with all the characters. And the thematic element, and we're going to talk about this a lot, myth versus reality. That's the theme. The stories told versus what really happened. There are 13 different instances of this, and I'm going to number them off as we go. That's the first one. For Will, it is his personal theme. Will he be the old killer he used to be, or won't he? That's the emotional tug of war he's going to struggle with the whole movie. And there is a terrifyingly sad reality to his spiritual goal that we're going to get to. We're going to come across at the end. Catalyst. Another myth versus reality happens in the next scene, the very next scene, when they're having coffee inside Will's place. And the kid tells the story of what happened to Delilah at the hands of the cowboys. But his version is embellished over what really happened, right? He cut off her teats. Right. They cut her face off. The story just keeps... Yeah,
every time the story gets told, it gets worse and worse.
It gets worse and worse.
Cut her eyes out.
Yeah. Then he repeats that Will doesn't seem to physically match the stories he's heard. And he says, quote, Uncle Pete says you was the meanest goddamn son of a bitch alive, on account that you're as cold as the snow and you don't have no weak nerve nor fear. So again, this is all early in the film, and it's setting up in the first 10 minutes that something bad happened to a girl, and what seems to be an old, broken-down hog farmer used to be the biggest badass that walked North America. Another element to this myth versus reality, in most cases, the reality is nothing like the story that's being told. However, in William Money's case, we're going to find throughout the film that his reality was actually worse than the stories. Like, the stories they tell about Will Money are almost tame compared to what really happened.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to that too. So in any case, that's the catalyst moment at the 11-minute mark, is the kid asking Will to join him on his job to take the two cowboys that cut up Delilah. Debate begins. At the 13-minute mark, we see the debate. Will is his continued failures as a hog farmer. I think they show him falling down twice trying to, separate these hogs. At one point, he stands at the fence and he watches the Schofield kid ride off in the distance. This is what Blake Snyder would call the stasis equals death. If he stays in this place, he's going to die just like that, an old, broken-down hog farmer. He doesn't seem very prosperous. The kid even says that. You don't seem very prosperous. He's not. He needs this money.
Yeah.
He could really use the money.
By comparison, John Wick just comes out of retirement. He's ready to go, right?
Well, yeah.
And by comparison, there's been some time that has passed since Bill Money had been an active assassin or whatever hitman, whatever he had done. He can't even ride a horse.
Yeah, I like that you brought that up, because it is important. They do allude that about a decade has gone by.
And he's kind of in his later years.
John Wick, it's like maybe 3 or 4 years have gone by.
Yeah.
That's it. Like 3 maybe. You know what I mean? Shit, that's nothing, really.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, yeah, and that's the other thing. I didn't write it down in the notes, but I did, like, when I was writing my pen notes and I was writing it in pen, I wrote age real small and circled it. Every time they showed a moment where he was showing his age, he falls twice with the hogs. He falls off the horse at least 5 times. In fact, every time he tries to get on the horse in this movie, he falls.
Yeah.
Like, they just constantly are showing that he's an old man. Okay, so then next scene, to see if he still has it, he does some practice shooting. And he finds that he probably has gotten old, because he can't even hit a goddamn coffee can with his revolver. Now, here's the funny thing. There's a rule of 3 here. We've talked about it in previous podcasts, the rule of 3. And this one is going to be centered around whether or not he is back, okay? This is stage 1, firing a gun for the first time in a decade. The fact that he even finds his gun, he was looking for it, and he finds it, and he's going to go outside and practice shooting. That's the first stage of is he back, okay? Mm-hmm. There's going to be 2 more key ones later.
Yeah, is he or isn't he, right?
Is he or isn't he? So break into 2. The final stage in the 4-point push, by the way, there is a little comedic moment with that, by the way. He misses every shot with the handgun. And instead of, oh, geez, maybe I should reload and try again, he's so pissed that he goes back into his house and grabs a shotgun. And he comes out and annihilates the coffee can with a shotgun. And the little girl, the daughter, says to the older son, oh, he's got 2 kids, by the way, if I buried that lead. Yeah. He's got 2 little kids now. And the little girl says to the brother, did Pa used to kill folks? Or maybe she says shoot. I don't know. Maybe she said, did Pa used to shoot folks? I don't know.
Yeah.
But he's so mad at the goddamn coffee can that he comes out with his shotgun. All right, break into 2. The final stage of the 4-point push is the decision to jump into the second act.
Yeah.
Now, it's usually a strong beat. Something happens that is actionable. It's intense, and we can clearly see, and we say to ourselves, that's it. We're now in Act 2. Mm-hmm. This one's interesting. It doesn't really have one of those. In fact, the break into 2 and the break into 3 are more mental decisions for Money, for William Money. He doesn't really, like, shoot somebody and be like, now I'm back. You know what I mean? Like, it's just something that's going on in his head.
Yeah.
We assume he's made the decision the morning that he's shaving, right? Like, that's when you get the idea that, yeah, he's decided he's going to do this.
Yeah.
But there wasn't anything really actionable that made us know that. We just sort of knew it, So, and that is roughly at the 18-minute mark is when he makes that decision. We know that because, like I said, he's shaving, he's getting dressed, and he takes flowers out to his dead wife's grave.
I love the scene when he leaves his kids. Jessie was watching it with me, and she's like, oh my God. Because how old are these kids?
The kid can't be more than, what, 11, 12 years old?
Oh, the oldest kid, yeah. And then there's the younger one.
The little girl's got to be 6 or 7.
Yeah, and if you get hungry, kill a chicken or something.
Yeah, like, I mean, think about how times were different back then. He's just like, I'll have Ned's, Indian wife, Sally Two Trees. I'll have her look in on you every now and again. If you get hungry, kill a chicken. And keep those damn hogs separated. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? And the son, at no point is the son like, Dad, you're leaving us? He's just like, all right, I got it. I got the ranch from here. Like, you were a man at 12 back in those days.
Or in this case, 11.
Yeah, 11 years old, and you're a man of the house. And I always thought it was funny, too, completely unrelated, but I always liked the line. In Interview with the Vampire, when Brad Pitt is telling his story to, oddly enough, Christian Slater, who we already mentioned. Yeah. We mentioned him twice on an episode that has nothing to do with him.
Right.
He tells him, he was telling the story of in the 1700s when he first got bit and became a vampire. He goes, I was 17 or 18 years old, but times were different. I was a man at that age. I already had my own plantation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I always like that line about how times have changed. And then you watch this movie and you're like, no, you're a man at 11, not 17. You're a man at 11. All right, fun and games. Now that we're in Act 2, we start with Skinny finding out about the bounty, slapping around Alice, and going to Little Bill to tell him. Mm-hmm. Myth versus reality number 3. When Skinny approaches Bill's house, he says, quote, I heard you did the roof yourself. To that, a rather offended Bill replies, I practically built the whole damn thing myself, which is another example of the theme. Story moves around town, but, it's hardly true. And this is just again, a seemingly meaningless throwaway line of dialogue actually is serving and supporting the theme of the movie. Yeah. There's no fat to trim in this script. Every word counts.
Right.
And that's why it's an amazing screenplay. On his journey, roughly around the 28-minute mark, usually the B story enters around 30 minutes in, Will stops at the ranch of his old friend Ned Logan and his wife Sally Two Trees and recruits him to join him on the job. Myth versus reality number 4. As Will relays the story of what happened to Delilah to Ned, he's embellishing even more. Now, what does he say when? No, I think he says is when her eyes got cut out. So first the kid says they cut off her teats. And now he's like, cut her teats, they cut her eyes out. Like, I mean, it's getting even worse now.
I love, like, with every gruesome detail, the expression on Clint Eastwood's face.
Yeah.
Where he squints and he's like, oh, hell.
Yeah. You can almost hear him go, Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, every time. So Ned serves as the B story because he will ultimately drive Will to his spiritual goal. Ned agrees to join him, and they set off, after their tangible goal, which is to find the cowboys who cut up Delilah. Okay, more fun and games. Intro to English Bob and his biographer, W.W. Beauchamp. By the way, I love every moment that Richard Harris is on screen.
Absolutely.
I fucking love him in this movie. And he's only got like 4 scenes. Yeah. But he is so fun in this movie to watch. They're on a train to Wyoming. Myth versus reality number 5. The folks on the train have heard of English Bob, and another example of how his reputation precedes him as he challenged them to pheasant shooting, and he wins easily. Here's an interesting part. Remember when I said the stories about William Money, the stories don't match reality, that the reality is actually worse? This is another one of those. They only know the story of English Bob because he shoots Chinamen off the railroads. But when he gets out there to shoot pheasants, he hits, 8? 8 out of 10 flying birds with a handgun. Yeah. So again, they are not only corrected on their thoughts about English Bob, they're more impressed, right? Because it was a contest and the only guy hit one. He hit one bird. So yeah, where I lost my place here. Okay. Starting to get the idea that when it's a cold-blooded killer like English Bob and William Money, the realities are usually accurate or worse than the myths. After they arrive in Big Whiskey, he has a comical, though timely, line in a barber shop where he's talking about how nobody would be able to assassinate a king or queen because you would stand in awe in their presence.
Right.
And then he says as he's leaving, smiling, now a president, well, I mean, why not shoot a president? Like, now, in and of itself, it's a funny line. I realize timely, it's not that funny right now.
Yeah.
So when I was watching that scene and that line came up, I remembered the line and laughed. And then I was like, oh, I don't know if we can put that in the podcast because it's a little negatively timely. But still, it was a funny line, just the way he delivers it. You know what I mean? He's like,
right. Yeah, it was funny.
Why not? Why not shoot a president? Myth versus reality number 6, 7, and 8. All come in back-to-back scenes as the deputies are gearing up to take on English Bob, and the stories about how tough Little Bill is or was, and whether or not he's afraid of somebody like English Bob come up. When they're face-to-face with Little Bill, Bob tells him he's heard that he died. Well, first of all, I'm jumping ahead. So the myth versus reality number 6. The first part is Clyde comes in, one-arm Clyde, which is another funny scene because he wants to reload his own gun. And the guy that loaded it for him is like, Clyde, what are you doing? I already loaded that. And then he's like, Christ, you got 3 guns and only 1 arm. Anyway, so in that scene, Clyde tells all these guys are like, oh, I don't know if Little Bill can handle it. He's never gone against guys like this before. Did he seem scared? And Clyde's like, guys, he worked those old towns in Kansas. You know what I mean? Like he starts telling Little Bill's story, you know? So, and then they go to face Little English Bob. By the way, I'm going to trip over some of my words because Bill and Bob and Will are the 3 main guys. Will, Bill, and Bob are the 3 main guys. So forgive me if I fuck this up a little bit. So when they get face to face with Little Bill, English Bob tells him, I heard that you died. And you can kind of tell in the way he delivers the line that he really meant to say hoped, because he does seem worried when he sees Little Bill.
Yeah.
He was not afraid of these deputies at all. But when he comes out of that barbershop and he sees Little Bill, he says to himself, I don't know if you can tell because he says it under his breath, he goes, shit and fried eggs. and WW Beauchamp just sort of looks at him like, what? Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
So anyway, to which Bill replies, I heard that one myself. So another example, again, these are just meaningless throwaway lines, but they're supporting that theme about how stories travel.
Yep.
Right? Then biographer W.W. Beauchamp hears the name Little Bill Daggett, and he's obviously impressed. Even he has heard of him, and likely his reputation. Again, the script is littered with these stories, these reputations, these fables. This is about 39 minutes in, and we've already talked about 8 instances where stories traveled to areas, you know what I mean? And people built up their own myths in their mind based on those stories. Another funny setup of dialogue is when Little Bill hears that WW is a writer, the first thing he says is, letters and such? No, wait, the reason I'm laughing is this is going to pay off at the end. Because this is a setup, and it gets paid off at the end. But the funny thing about it is, why would that be the first thing you ask?
Yeah. When
somebody's a writer, you say letters and such? That would be like today if I told somebody I was a writer, and they're like emails? Like, no! You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, so anyway, it doesn't end well for English Bob in this scene as Bill beats the shit out of him, and then they arrest him at the end of it. Back to Ned and Will, they meet up with the Schofield kid and discover he can't see for shit. There's a lot of comedic moments there as well. Rejoin. Now we go back to Bill. He's now in the jailhouse with WW and Bob. He's reading the book the biographer wrote called The Duke of Death, which is another funny moment where he keeps fucking up the name, calling it The Duck of Death. Myth versus reality example number 9, since the book is mostly BS. Perhaps, this kind of shit is how these stories got started, is because of books like this, right? Immediately followed by Myth versus Reality number 10, where he tells the story of Two Gun Corky Corcoran and why he was really named Two Gun Corky. And, the stories, it was because he carried 2 guns. Well, it wasn't. He carried 1 gun, but had a huge dick. That's why he was called Two Gun Corker. Two Gun Corky. Again, Myth versus Reality. Back to Will, Ned, and the kid at the campfire. Myth versus Reality number 11. Where the kid lies his ass off about how many people he killed just to sound impressive. The next day while riding, okay, so the kid does ask him, I heard you killed you killed 2 county deputies or something. The next day, here's Myth vs. Reality number 12. They're riding along, and Ned says to Will, hey, that story the kid told last night? It wasn't 2. Didn't you kill 3? deputies or something like that. And he's like, I don't remember. I was drunk. But again, this is a perfect example of how even the
story changes. Yeah.
But not only that, the reality was worse than the story.
Yeah.
The story was that he killed 2 officers.
Yeah,
he killed 3. You know what I mean? All right. So again, everybody else's stories are getting embellished while his stories are actually getting diminished from reality. Okay, so we've hit 12 examples of myth versus reality before we even hit the damn midpoint. Okay? There's only going to be one more. Remember I said there's 13. There's going to be one more, but it comes later. All right, back at the jailhouse now. Bill gives WW the chance to shoot him and take off with Bob. It doesn't go the way English Bob hoped, but why this is important is he basically explains the whole ending of the film. It's pure foreshadowing. It's clever because the fear I'm sure the filmmakers might have had, and the writer himself, was that the audience isn't going to buy the ending. For the whole movie, we've set up this broken down old man, and he's going to walk into a room filled with, people with guns and take everybody out. The reason it works is because of this scene. Because Little Bill takes the time to explain, if you're cool-headed, it doesn't matter how fast you are. Everybody else that is rushing and they're nervous and they're scared are going to take their guns out and fire wildly, and they're going to miss most of the time.
Right.
If you keep your head and you calmly fire your weapon, you'll hit your target every time. He basically gives foreshadowing to how the movie ends. Because everybody else will be panicking and he won't.
Right.
Okay, second sign Will is coming back. Remember, the first sign was that he was doing target practice. Second sign of him coming back to his old self, when, sick and tired, he curses at the horse. Remember, he said earlier that his wife cured him of cursing and drinking and wickedness. Well, at this point, when he's he's starting to slip back. Again, 3 points here. So what was the part? Oh, so it's raining and he's sick and he's tired and he falls off the horse again. And he calls the horse something like a no good pig fucker or something. So, when I'm watching it and I had to write it down, I was like, oh my God, that's the first time he's cursed.
Yeah.
It's the first time he's cursed yet because he said his wife cured him of that. So that's the second point. He does immediately apologize though. Like right after he gets on the horse, he's all, I'm sorry. But the words flew out of his mouth, probably like they did in the old days. All right, so that was part 2 of the rule of 3. All right, Bob is sent out of town as Will is arriving. There's a moment where they're at the train, where they're waiting for the train to pass, and you can see English Bob on the train as they're arriving in Big Whiskey. W.W. Beauchamp decides to stay with Little Bill. His stories are better. The protagonist makes it to Greeley's to meet with Strawberry Alice. Will is sick, but he refuses to drink. And I tell people this all the time. Back in the 1800s, they didn't have NyQuil. So you drank whiskey if you had the fever, right? If you had a fever, you drank whiskey because it warmed your esophagus and made you sweat out the fever. He refuses to drink because his dead wife Claudia, cured him of drinking. So he refuses. That only makes him sicker. He's just sitting there soaking wet from the rain, getting sick. All right, midpoint scene. About an hour and 12 minutes into a 2-hour, 10-minute film, Bill meets Will for the first time, and he beats the shit out of him just like he did English Bob. His 2 friends escape and collect him outside, and they begin his recovery. This is a tangible goal. They somewhat achieved the tangible goal. They at least found the place and met with Alice. I want you to realize why this is important. No, they didn't kill the cowboys, but with all the stories set up about these BS stories going around, it's very likely they could have gotten there to find out there was no cut prostitute. There wasn't even a bounty. You know what I mean? Like, that could have just been a story they heard. They don't have the internet. They can't fact check this shit. So they just rode for a week and a half or however long it took to get there. They could have got there and then found out, oh, it was another embellished story.
Right.
But they don't. They get there. They find Greeley's. They find Strawberry Alice. They find that it's true. This is Delilah, and we're going to offer money. Like, they realize, so in a sense, that is achieving part of your tangible goal. They get there and they know what they got to do.
Right.
We talk about how the midpoint is usually the false victory, right? It's the false victory, and then the second half of the movie, everything goes to shit. The all is lost is usually the opposite of the false victory, right? It's a false defeat. Sometimes they're swapped. Whichever one your midpoint scene is, the all is lost is the opposite. Mm-hmm. So if your midpoint is a false victory, then your all is lost is a false defeat. They swap in this one. And we talked about it before. It doesn't happen often, right? But we talked about it in The Fabelmans. we felt that was a swap too.
Mm-hmm.
The midpoint here, I believe, is not a false victory. It's a false defeat. And the defeat is that Little Bill seemingly thwarts their plans by beating the shit out of him, beating Bill within an inch of his life.
Right.
And if that didn't do it, the fever might kill him, right? He might have died from the fever. He's in a bad state, right? He's close to death. He's bleeding. He's got to get stitched up. But things are about to turn around. So I call that a false defeat. Bad guys closing in. Some time passes, about 3 days actually, where Ned and the kid are scouting the cowboys. They're nursing Will back to health. They're boning the prostitutes. Like I said, it's been 3 days. The final myth versus reality moment number 13 happens when Will's fever breaks and he wakes up and he sees Delilah. He sees that she only has a few scars on her face. The stories were horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
But when he sees her, he's like, oh, you just only have a few scars. It kind of reminded me watching it again. Again, I've seen this movie hundreds of times. But when I watched it this time, as a little side note, it reminded me of there's a scene. You're not a Game of Thrones guy, are you?
No, never got into it.
Is Jesse
No,
at all?
No.
Okay. So there's a scene where Tyrion, who's played by Peter Dinklage, there's this story that a guy tells him, like, you're the biggest disappointment I've ever heard. And that sounds offensive. But then the guy goes into the story. He's like, because when I was a kid, I came to see you. You had just been born. You were a baby. And we all heard these stories about how you had a tail and claws and a red eye and your head was twice the size of your body and blah, 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 blah. And he goes, and then when we got there, we looked at you and there was no tail. There was no claws, no red eye. He goes, your head was a tad large and your arms and legs were a tad small, but... And he says he's talking to him. He's telling him this, and he said, "I told your sister that's not a monster. That's just a baby." You know what I mean? So it's like it reminded me of that when he wakes up and he sees Delilah.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he's like, "She's just a girl. She's just a girl. She's got some scars on her face. That's it." So that is the final myth versus reality moment number 13. When they find the cowboys, the young Davy is the first to go, unfortunately. Ned, I say unfortunately because Davy really seems like a nice kid. He seems very like he really didn't do any of the cutting, Yeah. And he seems really remorseful the whole movie about what happened. And so unfortunately he's the first to go. But Ned falters when it matters the most, and Will has to step in to do the killing. Little Bill finds out about this. Ned quits and heads south. He couldn't take it anymore. The Barty boys catch up with him and take him prisoner. Will and the kid don't know about any of this, and they continue scouting for the second cowboy, Quick Mike. They kill him. You realize I'm rushing through the whole second act here because these are just like points. These are just points that happen. They kill him, specifically the kid kills him while he's sitting in the shitter, and they make their escape. And they're waiting at their rendezvous point as little Sue approaches by horseback with their money. So this is an hour and 45 minutes in, and the kid is breaking down. He admits this is the first time he's ever killed anybody, and he can't handle it, right? And again, this is happening mere scenes after Ned couldn't handle killing somebody, right? Like these two guys, one at the end of his career, one at the beginning of his career as supposed killers, and they both buckle under the pressure. That's going to be important when it comes to Will, right? Yep. But anyway, there's a line of dialogue here. This is probably one of the most famous scenes of the movie while they're waiting for little Sue to approach them on horseback. I'm just going to read the dialogue. The kid, it don't seem real. How he ain't never going to breathe again, never. How he's dead, and the other one too, all on account of pulling a trigger. Will, it's a hell of a thing killing a man. You take away all he's got and all he's ever going to have. The kid, yeah, well, I guess they had it coming. Will, we all have it coming, kid. That was the clip they showed at the Oscars when this movie was presented as one of the nominees for Best Picture. Okay, all is lost. 1 hour, 50 minutes in. Little Sue delivers the money and the bad news about Ned, who was beaten to death by Little Bill. Now, again, I actually, before we hear about Ned, it's not a false defeat, as all is lost normally is. It's opposite of the midpoint, so it's a false victory. The reason why it's a false victory is they got their money. They killed the cowboys. They got their money. They're getting ready to get on their horses and head south. Right. They're going to go home. They won. But it's a false victory because they find out Ned was killed. Yeah. When Will finds out that Ned was killed by Little Bill, a switch is flipped.
Yeah.
He's back now. right? Remember I said the rule of 3? The 3 points. The first one was target practice. The second one was he cursed. Guess what the third one is?
Drinking.
He grabs the bottle of whiskey from the Schofield kid and starts. At that moment, you know. You're in the theater like, oh, fuck. Shit's about to go down now. Dude's drinking again. Like, at that moment, you're like,
yeah, because they hyped it up perfectly.
Right. And you're sitting there thinking, I wouldn't trade places with Little Bill right now for all the whiskey in Ireland. Like, that's fucking, you know it's on now. It's fucking on. And that kind of closes out the whole myth versus reality. Oh, wait. No. That's that he is back. What closes out the myth versus reality? Little Sue starts rambling off all this other shit that he had done that the kid didn't even know about.
While he's drinking.
Like more, and we're gonna get to there's more on that later. I'm gonna get to that later.
It made that whole scene so great.
Oh my God, it's the best scene of the whole movie. Okay, Dark Night of the Soul. As discussed in many other episodes, the Dark Night of the Soul, it could be 2 seconds, it could be 2 minutes, it could be 2 scenes. It's the bridge from where the protagonist learns the bad news and then makes the decision to jump into Act 3. This is another quick one. We talked about the one in Jaws only lasted a few seconds too. This one's a quick one too. You could argue him reaching for the bottle of whiskey and starting to drink is his Dark Night of the Soul. Like, that could have been that moment of debate. Because right then he's thinking, what am I going to do? And you know that, like, once he starts drinking, that decision is made. He knows what he's going to do. All right, break into 3. As previously mentioned in the break into 2, there doesn't seem to be a big sort of plot point here, that catapults them into Act 3, like you would see a big scene or anything. It's more of a mental decision. It's a mental and emotional decision that William Money makes to jump into Act 3. So,
the catalyst was his buddy being killed and put on display.
Yeah, well,
right?
I was going to say you could argue if there is a break into 3 at all. But see, he's already made the decision.
Yeah, he's already made the decision. But I guess maybe it was when he finally saw him on display.
I think he was already there to kill everybody.
Yeah.
I think that just pissed him off even more. You know what I mean?
Right.
So what my brother's alluding to, and we're going to get to that right now, the 5-point finale. Here we go. Gathering the team. Will gives instructions to the kid. Take the money, head back. If I don't come back, give my share and Ned's share to Sally Two Trees so that she can give it to my kids, and you can keep the rest. But if I do come back, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. So that's him loading up the team, and there's a scene where he throws the empty bottle of whiskey onto the ground. You know now the bottle of whiskey's gone. You know what that means? Shit's about to go down, right? Yeah. He rides himself to Greeley's with 0 fucks left to give at this point. Execution of the plan. He goes in, he walks right in while everybody else in there is armed. It's a posse that are going to look for him.
Right.
That's what they're there for, is to posse up and to go look for him. And he walks in there and says, "Who owns this shithole?" Which is, again, one of my favorite lines, where you hear him cock his gun, and the prostitutes are watching, and all the gunmen are watching, and the deputies are. They all turn, and they see him standing with a gun. The first line he says is, "Who owns this shithole?" I love it. So he sees Skinny. Skinny says, "I own this establishment." Actually, first, nobody wants to answer, and he points the gun at the one deputy, Fatty. I'm not being mean. That's literally his name. His name is Fatty if you look at the credits. He looks at him and he goes, "You fat man, speak up." and that's when Skinny says, "I own this establishment." And then he shoots him. Yep. He just shoots an unarmed man. I have thoughts on this too, but we're going to get to that in a second. I don't want to rush this 5-point plan here. So he kills Skinny, and again, the plan next is to kill Little Bill, right? Mm-hmm. Which at this point, the room is, again, it's filled with armed deputies and mercenaries, and they're all shell-shocked about what just happened. And they're all just standing there, right?
Right.
Will aims his gun at Bill, and still nobody's doing anything. They're all just standing there like, holy fuck, what's this? I've never seen this in real life before. Hightower surprise, the gun jams. He was going to take out Bill right then.
Right.
And the gun jams. Now he's about to be in a real shootout with Bill and everybody in the room. By the way, because the gun jammed, he only has left a handgun, which we saw earlier in the movie, his poor shooting with the handgun, right?
But he was sober then.
And he couldn't hit a coffee can, right? We're talking about 2 hours earlier, couldn't hit a coffee can, he was sober. All right, dig down deep without much of a chance to think about it. Again, there's a lot of movies that dig down deep is also a thing that could happen within seconds. Not having the luxury of time to think about it, Will throws his shotgun right at Bill. That throws off his timing and his rhythm, right? Because Bill was going to reach for his handgun, but now he's got a gun flying at him. He's got to kind of get out of the way of it. It allows Will to pull out his gun, and while everybody in the place is panicking and firing all over God's green earth, he's calmly picking people off one at a time.
Right.
So, and that's a funny scene too, where they showed like the Deputy Fatty and the Deputy Andy are standing next to each other. They're firing and they're hitting like the bar and the bottles that are on the bar. They're not even coming close to Will, right? Yeah. And he's just one at a time. He gets little Bill first in the gut, boom, and then he takes out boom, boom, boom. He starts taking dudes out. After the initial killing is done, execution of the new plan was that, by the way, but after the plan's not done yet because Bill's still alive. Not that he knows it yet, but he suggests everyone else flee out the back if they don't want to get killed. And they all listen.
Yeah.
A room filled with armed dudes, and they're all like, all right, you got it, sir. And they all go out the back door. Like, get the fuck out of there. Nobody wants anything to do with him at this point. Then Will meets W.W. Beauchamp, the biographer, by the way. And that's when he realizes Bill is still alive. At this point, he kills him at point blank range with a Spencer rifle. Yeah. There is a funny moment there. When I thought was going to happen in theater, didn't happen. And this could have been Clint Eastwood's little dig on the myth versus reality, what you think is going to happen versus what does happen. He sees the biographer, and the biographer's all, I'm not armed. The first thing he says is, pick up that rifle. And I'm like, oh, man. He's going to pick up that rifle, and he's going to shoot him. Just so he can say he didn't shoot another unarmed guy. But he doesn't. He picks up the rifle, and he just tells him, give it to me so I can reload it.
Yeah.
And then, more of the myth versus reality. But this is all reality. W.W. Beauchamp is impressed. He's like, you killed 5 people. Who'd you kill first? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did you kill Bill first? So anyway, and he gives another good line too. He goes, all I know is who's going to be last. The biographer basically shits his pants and runs out of there. All right, so resolution. As he's leaving, he drops the threats to all the town and the onlookers and the prostitutes that are watching.
Yeah.
He's basically like, treat your women better, give Ned a proper burial, do this, do that, or I'm going to come back and kill all you sons of bitches.
Yeah.
Or actually before that he says, all right, I'm coming out. Anyone takes a shot at me, I'm going to kill him. And not just that, I'm going to kill his wife and burn his damn house down.
Right. I love that line.
So anyway, great final moment for him as he rides off into the rainy night. And then, of course, the closing image is a perfect bookend from the beginning. It's another Will silhouette to the sunset. This time he's standing at Claudia's grave. And the closing crawl details how he moved to San Francisco and prospered in dry goods. And the picture of Will Money, I believe, disappears. Like he fades when that crawl is going on. All right, we got a lot to unpack here. We're not done. That was just the beats. Now, notes on character. Okay. So I mentioned this already. Several moments were shown that depict Will's age. I didn't think I put it in the notes, but I guess I did. He falls not once, but twice while trying to wrangle the feverish hogs, and there's countless times where he stumbles trying to get on the damn horse. As mentioned, when Will is still in the debate stage in the first act, he does the target practice where he tries to hit the coffee can, right? Mm-hmm. He misses every shot. He gets mad, grabs the shotgun. We already talked about that. However, in the climactic scene, the only other time he uses a revolver, he's dead on and spot on in every shot. This, I believe, signifies it's not just because he was drunk and he was his old self again, but it signifies to me the killer instinct in him. If he's aiming at a coffee can, his brain is not invested in hitting the target. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if it's a person, particularly an assailant who's shooting back at you, his instinct takes over and his brain targets the shot perfectly. He's dead on every shot. What does he say? Oh, even after the killings, even after the shooting, when he's at the bar, he says, I've always been lucky. Oh, no, he says, I was lucky in the order. I've always been lucky when it comes to killing folks. Right? So that kind of explains how even when he was drunk out of his mind, he was the deadliest guy around because his brain would kick in on that killer instinct.
Yeah.
Greeley's owner, Skinny, is another interesting dissect. Because at first he comes off kind of like a good guy at the very beginning. He has his own little save the cat moment when he saves Delilah, right? The guy's cutting her up and he puts a gun to his head and says, "Get off of her, cowboy." You know, like, so you're thinking, oh, Skinny was really protective of these girls. But as the movie goes on, we kind of find out that Skinny's a piece of shit, right? Like, he calls them whores, he calls them bitches, he smacks them around, he treats them like their property. And he's otherwise kind of a shitty dude. Mm-hmm. And the reason they do this is so that you can forgive Will for killing him when he was unarmed, right? Mm-hmm. Especially like I said, they throw that part in, like you said, they throw that part in at the end where he put Ned out front.
Right.
So if for no other reason, we've spent 2 hours lessening our like for Skinny, right. But in those same 2 hours, we enhanced our like for Ned. And when Will says he should have armed himself if he's going to decorate his saloon with my friend.
Right.
At that point, we forgive him. We're like, okay, yeah, you can kill Skinny. That's fine. Right? like nobody's mad at that, right? Similarly, going back to Will, despite his reputation, we only see him as someone we would root for. He's a good dad at the beginning. Like, this is what we see. Right. He's a good dad. He's a widower. I guess I would say he's a good widower because he wants to stay true to his wife. He doesn't go get a girl of his own or anything like that. He doesn't cuss anymore. He doesn't drink anymore. These are all the things that we like about him. And he defends Ned, mm-hmm. right? When Ned first meets the kid and the kid's like, "I'm not splitting my money with him. I don't want to go along with him." He says, "All right, well, then we're going back." You know what I mean? Like, he needs this money, but he's not going to, refuse Ned. He's going to stick up for him. Yeah. So, and again, when Davy is shot and screaming in pain for some water, which is another kind of, although it's sad for Davy, it's kind of a comical scene. Will yells out, "Will you give him some water? God damn it, we ain't going to shoot." So you see that even as a killer, he has moments of heart. Yeah. Right? So here's where I get to the sad reality of his spiritual journey. He mentions several times that he barely remembers any of the killings or any of his stories of the past because he was too drunk or he doesn't remember them. If his wife Claudia cured him of drinking and wickedness, as he put it, and gave him 2 loving children, then he was never really punished for any of his past sins. Claudia eventually dying of smallpox, that's not a punishment to him because it wasn't at his hands. Right? The opening crawl suggests it was not at his hands. She died of smallpox. He didn't do anything that he would feel guilty about when it comes to Claudia. That is why this journey had to happen. Will has to suffer. He has to pay for his sins. This time, he recruits his best friend Ned to go along. Ned never makes it back alive. Yeah. That's because of Will. Will is going to feel that guilt for the rest of his life. That he got Ned into this, and he didn't just die. He was whipped to death. Yeah. It was a bad death, right? That's his punishment that he now has to endure. Because of him, Ned is dead. This is supported throughout the film. Specifically, when he's dying, he says that he sees visions and ghosts. These spirits of his victims are the angel of death coming to collect for his past. Killing him, particularly at that moment, like from the fever, that would have been too humane for Will. He needs to suffer. The guilt of being responsible for Ned's death is going to cut deeper than any death. The angel of death was certainly there, but it wasn't coming for him. It was coming for Ned. Mm-hmm. Eventually, Ned suffers again, like I said, the most brutal of deaths, and that's his payment for his sins. That's Ned's payment for the sins that he did in the past. Within the killing of the young Davy scene, Ned fails to do the killing. This losing his nerve and falters, this is emasculating for him. He was a once hardened killer himself. Now he feels that he's forced to quit. Mm-hmm. Almost the out of embarrassment, right? And like in a way, he at that point quitting and leaving should have saved him, but it didn't. The boys caught up to him and killed him. So that's on Will. Another side point, the rain serves as a driving factor throughout the film. First, it's dark and mysterious. Most of the film, the brutal scenes happen when it rains. English Bob's beatdown is the only exception. That happened in broad daylight. Yeah. But everything else, the cowboys cutting Delilah in the beginning, it's raining. When Will gets sick and gets the shit kicked out of him by Little Bill, it's raining. And of course, the ending scene where he kills 5 people, it's raining. Also, almost comically, the rain serves as a metaphor when the biographer is back at Little Bill's house and Bill's filling these pages that he's writing down with this load of BS that Little Bill's giving him about how great he is and what a badass he is.
Right.
The rain's coming through the roof. So that's a metaphor that there's holes in this story, right? That as much as he's telling about how great he is, it's bullshit. And that's why the roof is leaking all the water. And he has that funny moment where he's like, oh, maybe you should just hang the carpenter. Little Bill gets pissed because he was the carpenter.
Yeah.
All right. A few more points of trivia before we move on. $1,000 bounty in 1880 is worth nearly $31,000 today. Shot in Alberta, Canada, the town of Big Whiskey is fictional. Clint has directed 16 feature films before Unforgiven and another 23 films after. Unforgiven, his 17th film, was the first of his to garner any acting nominations ever.
Wow.
And a Best Picture nomination. For the 24 films since Unforgiven, 11 acting roles had Oscar nominations and 4 of them won.
Yeah.
Here are the supporting roles in Clint-directed movies. Gene Hackman in Unforgiven, that was the first one, and he won. Tim Robbins, Mystic River, he won as well. That's 2 in a row. Marcia Gay Harden, Mystic River, also was nominated. She didn't win. Morgan Freeman, $1 Million Baby, 2004, he won. So that's 3 Oscars in the Best Supporting category in Clint-directed films. Matt Damon, nominated for Best Supporting Actor in Invictus, 2009, and Kathy Bates in Richard Jewell, 2019. Also, here's the leading roles. Clint was the first. He directed himself to a Best Actor nomination in 92. That was the first one. Meryl Streep, nominated for Best Actress in 1995. Didn't win. Sean Penn, Mystic River, 2003. He does win. Hilary Swank, $1 Million Baby, 2004. She wins. So that's back-to-back years where the lead role in a Clint-directed movie won the Oscar.
Wow.
Clint Eastwood was also nominated for $1 Million Baby in 2004, but he didn't win. Angelina Jolie, nominated for Best Actress in Changeling, 2008. Didn't win. Morgan Freeman, nominated Best Actor in Invictus, 2009, didn't win. And finally, Bradley Cooper, nominated for American Sniper, 2014, didn't win. But isn't that crazy that he had directed? It's almost like he took those 16 films to really figure out how to work with actors.
Yeah.
And then once Unforgiven hit, everything after that was fucking Oscar gold.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Clint himself has 4 Oscars, 2 for directing, 2 for producing a Best Picture. 2 for Unforgiven, 2 for $1 Million Baby. No acting Oscars. Huh. The screenplay floated around Hollywood for nearly 20 years.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and it reminds me of how, there's that story that the book for Schindler's List was in Spielberg's drawer for 11 years before he decided to make it. It's just funny to me how these things sort of linger, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they don't ever get made, or when they do finally get made, they're masterpieces.
Right.
And it likely went through a lot of rewrites. In fact, there's one version of Unforgiven where the Schofield kid is so guilt-ridden at the end, he drowns himself.
Oh, wow.
As stated earlier, the film was released on August 7th, 1992, my 17th birthday. Frances Fisher, who plays Strawberry Alice and was dating Clint at the time, she was 4 months pregnant at the Academy Awards when the movie won Best Picture. Her and Clint's daughter, Francesca, was later born on August 7th, 1993, when I turned 8.
Crazy.
You see how Unforgiven and Clint and Frances Fisher, it all comes back to me.
Yeah.
2 credits are incorrectly swapped in the closing credits sequence on IMDb as well, because IMDb follows what's on screen. Mm-hmm. But 2 of the prostitutes are wrong. It says Faith, who was actually played by Beverly Elliott, says that Beverly Elliott played Silky. And Silky was actually played by Lisa Repo Martel. It says that she played Faith. They get it wrong on the film. Like, whoever was doing the credits got it wrong.
Wow. That's
and
crazy.
Again, IMDb follows what's on screen. They also have it wrong. But if you look at both of those actresses' individual pages, on the trivia part, it mentions that they're incorrectly credited.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know. It's so cool. First time I ever saw that. Somebody got the credits wrong.
Yeah.
How do you fuck that up? You had one job, dude. You had one job. All right. Last thing on Unforgiven before I turn it over to you on final thoughts. There's a fan theory going around the internet that the character, Clint Eastwood's character, Dirty Harry, is a descendant of William Money. And here's why. Not only because it's played by the same guy, but they have a similar savvy with a gun, with a handgun. They're ruthless to criminals, but most importantly, the end crawl of Unforgiven states that he moved to San Francisco, where he prospered in dry goods. Dirty Harry movies all take place in San Francisco, where Harry Callahan is an inspector for the San Francisco Police Department.
That's great. I love it.
Well, I finished my whiskey. Give me your final thoughts here.
Well, as usual.
How much of this? But how much of this that I just rattled off did you notice and see when you were watching the movie? Are you at the point now where you're watching a movie like this and you're like, oh, all is lost. Oh, there's the midpoint.
Yeah, actually, yeah. A lot of that I did see, yeah. Especially now. I mean, not probably the first time I saw it, right? But watching it, yeah, I do that all the time. I'll nudge Jesse. I'm like, oh, all's lost right here. It should be like, shut up, watch a movie.
How did Jesse like it? Was that the first time she'd seen it?
No, and she fell asleep because that's what she does in action films.
Oh, my God.
I know. But the next day she was like, why are you guys doing these movies? Because she walked in on Wick also. And she's like, oh no, And when Jesse says, oh no, that kind of sums up her review.
Well, anyone that needs to know about our Fargo episode, go back and listen to that.
She was kind of horrified. She's like, what do you guys see in these movies? They're just so violent.
Yes, but they're great movies. They're great movies. Okay.
Well, before we move on, I was going to say we're going to do 6 Degrees at the end of the next episode. You want to just give a tease on what the 6 Degrees will be on? That way, if our listener wants to try to figure it out before the next episode, they can give it a shot.
I like how we still say listener as singular.
Well,
we have one listener.
Yeah, we know who you are. Thanks, Mom. No.
Anyway, yeah. So my brother, perfect true to form, tried to pick 2 people that are hardly in anything. Yeah. And Aline Levasseur, who plays William Money's young daughter, Penny.
Penny Money.
In Penny Money, in which is kind of funny. Penny Money. In Unforgiven, with Bridget Reagan, who plays Addie, the bartender of the Continental in John Wick. Mm-hmm. So he wanted me to connect those 2.
And she hasn't been in a lot either, so.
Right. This was a fun one.
So yeah, we're gonna solve this at the end of the next episode. Well, as we always say at the end of each episode, first of all, thanks for listening, and go support your local cinema.
Keep drinking and keep watching.